as well as magnetic connections.
Why do you think it is that in climate science, the people that are asserting that there's only global warming and only that whatever this is that we're causing it, why do you think it is that they are totally eradicating the part of climate that has to do with the sun and the moon? Why is that being left out of the whole paradigm?
They're not doing it for scientific reasons. They're doing it for political reasons. And the whole system is politically driven, both by certain businesses which make large amounts of money out of it, such as oil companies, although they pretend they're on the other side, or rather the warmers pretend oil companies are supporting people like me, which is not the case. Oil companies stand to make trillions out of energy prices going up because the value of their assets goes up enormously when people are made to pay more for energy, which is the consequence of the global warmers' policies. So that is one driver of this nonsense, the oil and energy companies. The other driver, of course, is governments who use it as a reason or excuse to pay taxes. And then on the back of that, you've got now a great army of people who are in the green industry, and their only interest is to keep people believing in this nonsense. So they're like a sort of religious sect, if you like. They're just propagating falsity in order to maintain their position. Now, some of them actually believe in this falsity, of course. Because
well, I used to be one of them.
They're acquainted with reality, but they you know, it's a self-propagating delusional sect, which is driving nonsense at great cost to humanity.
So I used to be one of those people, and what was so stunning is when I rolled up my sleeves and I started to do my own personal due diligence, and It was so stunning to go into every facet of climate, and we ended up doing like 25 segments, and it's unfathomable. The atrocity of misinformation. The thing I wanted to ask you is, how is it that NASA can lie so complicitly?
Well, NASA is an extension of government and related to all the companies, huge companies, which produce jet engines. So, you know, they've got and the military, of course. So they're all part of the setup, which is needed to keep people ideologically in check. So, you know, unfortunately, science is a secondary thing for them. Now, President Eisenhower warned of the military-industrial complex establishing its own interests and taking over objectivity, and that, in fact, is what has happened. And it's not, in fact, new that this sort of thing has happened. I mean, there's been plenty of examples in the past where complete nonsense has been propagated by various regimes, mostly totalitarian regimes, but you know, they have propagated things like Stalin propagated nonsense, Hitler propagated nonsense. For some years, the general consensus of top scientists for a decade or so was that the continents didn't move and continental drift was impossible. And you know, it took a decade or so of people arguing about that to reveal that in fact continents do move. Fortunately then, there wasn't so many interest groups attached to the idea that they don't, but now we have a huge amount of interest groups attached to the falsity of the CO2 theory.
What do you think about the most elite circles of the world that really would like to make sure that Earth is not so populated? I mean, that's some serious business too. How do you think that connects with the policies for climate?
Well, a lot of them are the same people, because I've been into their meetings and raised things which, incidentally, they never report, even though they have a discussion. We had a big meeting in the Royal Society where me and two friends went in and we raised very pertinent questions, and they listened to give them their due, and they gave answers which are complete nonsense. And we hoped these would be in the record of the meeting, but funnily enough, there was nothing. But anyway, when they get talking and forget that we were there, they were talking quite explicitly about population control, which I found completely alarming. Because you see, you know, you just have to look at the world as it is and think, well, okay, 5,000 years ago, man was relying on, he was a nomad, you know, and he couldn't make much of the land, and world population was limited by the fact he was a nomad. But once he started to farm land, then of course world population could increase hugely. Now, right now, in terms of the sea, man is just a nomad. He just pulls fish out and eats them. But the sea could be farmed in many ways. Now, the living space in the sea is 300 times the living space on land. So, with the new approach, it's quite easy to see that the world population could be easily 300 times what it is now, and if not 3,000 times, because man is probably only using a tenth of the capacity of the land anyway. So the idea the world is full is a nonsense. I mean, the general mass of microbes in the world is bigger than mankind and all these artifacts anyway. So it's an absurdity, and these people are deluded, and they are often connected with the warmers. I don't know if there's any particular reason for that, but it happens to be that they are.
I remember speaking to an astrophysicist who passed away a few years ago, but before he passed, he said to me, "Do you know that you could put all the people in the world in the state of Texas and they could all be there?" And I said, "What?"
No, in Texas, I assure you, you don't need Texas. You can put him on the Isle of Wight if they only have a square meter each.
Exactly. Sometimes you talk about things, and unless you have a visual analogy, you don't really know what you're comparing to.
No, that's right. Well, people live in cities. Half the world lives in cities, so they sort of imagine the world is a city. But actually, if you're in space, you can see it's not. Roads are just lines on the maps, and cities are blobs, little blobs. And there's vast areas of, unused land, which could be used in many, many ways.
I want to talk about your biggest concerns as an astrophysicist, given that you are watching very carefully the solar action and the lunar dynamics. I want you to share your greatest concerns.
Well, there's extreme weather events, which we predicted a year ago. We said, or more than a year ago, we said we're going to go through a period of very extreme weather events due to what we call locking of the jet stream. The jet stream kind of gets stuck in places, which means you get repeating very hot weather or very cold weather in places. And this happened in America, both in the winter, where we predicted all those major blizzards, and these great blasts of very hot air, which we also predicted in this summer. Now, this tendency will carry on for a year or two, and it is worrying because it's going to cause death and so on, unless the governments of the world listen, which they don't want to. But this tendency will die out after a couple of years, and then we'll be in a less strained situation. And then after that, we'll have another, about 60 years later, there will be a tendency towards these extremes again. But before that, we're likely to get to a very cold, generally very cold period, which I mentioned, about 2035 or so. And that will be a serious problem because there will be, crop failures, hunger, and so forth, unless the wit of man is brought to bear on these situations. Now, you see, the capacity is there to solve all current food problems, but the political climate is often not there. I mean, like the famine in the Horn of Africa, it was known years ago it was about to happen. Well, it's now happening and people are dying. Now, a lot of people in the UN or whatever don't want that, of course, but they're hamstrung by various political problems which were perhaps insurmountable. But you see, in that case, man is the origin of the problems. I mean, the climate problem, if you like, or the weather problem of these extremes was foreseeable, but not dealt with. And in the longer run, we're talking about hundreds or possibly 1,000 or so years, there will be an ice age proper, in which case the Canadians and the Russians will come because they'll be frozen out.
Talk about that.
You could have giant greenhouses built on top of ice. It's all possible, I dare say, and perhaps that's what will happen in 500 or so years' time. I'm just saying that figure. We don't know because we haven't done enough work to predict the next ice age, but we do have a kind of handle on how often they they come, or how often the warm periods come and go, which is to do